Spoilers, bitch! What's up, everybody, and welcome to my spoiler talk of El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie. If you have not seen El Camino, please pause this video, go and watch it. It's on Netflix right now. Then come back, because I'm going to get into a lot of details that you should definitely experience along with the ride of this little epilogue of Breaking Bad. If you have not seen my full-on review, my spoiler-free review, which is a lot more in-depth with my actual thoughts on El Camino, check that out first as well. This is more so just me discussing a lot of the callbacks, a lot of the cameos, a lot of the tiebacks to Breaking Bad that I didn't want to discuss in full with my spoiler-free reviews. So, you've been warned if you have not already seen El Camino. Here we go, spoilers commence. So El Camino starts and you get this really nice scene between Jesse and one of my favorite characters of the entire show, Mike, played by the great Jonathan Banks. And it's essentially just them standing over this little river somewhere in season 5, probably right before they're about to announce their exit from Walt's empire, where they're discussing where would you go to get away from all of this. And Jonathan Banks, or Mike, tells them I would go to Alaska. You know, it's the final frontier. It's the Star Trek reference. It's the best escape to go. That would be the best place to go. And it kind of just sits in Jesse's mind and then cuts immediately to him plowing through that gate in that El Camino, which is where we last saw Jesse and presumably where this was going to start off regardless. That's where pretty much everybody thought this movie was going to start, immediately where the series ended and show us, you know, Jesse's path to redemption. And immediately you get into him finding Skinny Pete and Badger, you know, knocking on their door, looking like he's been through hell and back. And I really love the fact that they brought back those two characters. They didn't hide it, that was in the marketing. But I love the fact that you get the relationship between those three characters again, because they were always kind of goofballs. They were always just kind of like the goofball friends, the henchmen, if you will, of Jesse that you would only see pop up once in a while. But their scenes were always memorable. They always had standout scenes where they were talking about like the savings of cutting the pizza in season 4 or in season 5, talking about Star Trek whenever they're giving their Star Trek talk, and Badger gives his little pilot episode that he was talking about where Kurt gets his guts blown into space, or one of the Star Trek characters. Somebody's going to correct me on that down below. But you even see, like, as far as callbacks in the scene when it shows these two playing video games, they have like Star Trek style chairs, and they even have the Enterprise in the background. So nice little callbacks, little details there. That attention to detail is something that Vince Gilligan's always been great at. But the interaction that these three characters have in the first 10-15 minutes of this film is great, because not only does it really solidify how tight-knit that relationship is, but one of the best elements, the little subtle line that's given away, is when Jesse's getting ready to leave because they find out that this El Camino has LoJack and the cops are probably going to come looking for it, thinking that Jesse has it. And Skinny Pete switches it all around and says, look, you take my car, Badger, you take this car, and I'm going to keep the El Camino, and I'm going to tell him that we traded it, you know, straight up for pinks, and then I have no idea where you went. And he asks him, he's like, why are you doing all this? And he goes, like, you're my hero, yo, and then walks away. And it was a nice little line to kind of end that relationship with, because, you know, Skinny Pete and Badger, and even Combo to a certain degree, you never quite understood why they looked to Jesse as the leader so much. Obviously, he had the most to bring to the empire, or their little empire. They had the meth, the working with Heisenberg, working with Gus and everything. So he was the higher up as far as the meth business goes. But it's a nice little line to just detail his view of Jesse. The fact that Jesse has gone through all of this, has risen from this little street punk to, you know, apprentice to the meth empire that it was, the blue meth. And in fact, he looks at him, he's just like, you're my hero. I thought that was a really cool element to throw in there at the last second before you never see these characters again, presumably. Then you move on from that, and you have this whole plot where they do a lot of callbacks to Todd and his relationship with Jesse, which I did not expect, but it was a nice little addition where, you know, they show him in the cage, and they establish very clearly that Todd basically views Jesse as like a domesticated dog or a domesticated animal, where he comes up and he kind of licks his hands and messes his hair, and he's like, you know, I'm going to keep you a lot cleaner from now on, and, you know, tries to not intimidate him, but like kind of tries to reward him with the promise of food and things that are just very demeaning for a human being to go through. And it also adds another layer to how much pain and misery Jesse has been through. I mean, they clearly established it in the last 2-3 episodes of Breaking Bad, but they add a couple extra layers of how demeaning this guy's life became as this meth slave. Now, one thing that a lot of people pointed out, and I did notice it didn't bug me as much, but it's the one constant negative that I have seen in a lot of my comments so far on my El Camino spoiler-free review. People did not like the fact that Jesse Plemons, the guy who plays Todd, had clearly gained a lot of weight since Breaking Bad, and it was not hidden very well in El Camino. And that's valid. If that's something that takes you out of it, if that's something that just distracts you and bugs you, by all means, I'm not in any place to tell you you're wrong for that. I noticed it. I could tell by the way that they were framing him in his clothes that he had like a little bit of a beach ball going, that they were kind of giving him baggy clothes, but it didn't really bug me. It was still the same character. The performance was still there. It was Jesse Plemons as Todd. It was still that weird like mix between ultra polite and ultra creepy. So aside from the fact that yes, he had clearly had a weight gain, and it will kind of cloud the continuity slightly if you were that attention to detail, I can understand that being a negative for you. To me, it didn't bother me so much. I noticed it, I was like, oh yeah, he clearly gained some weight, but then I was immediately just sucked right back into the story. It didn't draw me out, so that is something that I needed to acknowledge. But I do like the fact that they have this whole section of flashback where Todd pulls Jesse out of the cage, his uncles are gone for the weekend, and he kind of wants to have like a boys' weekends together with Jesse, and takes him to his apartment, and they find this maid there who Todd has murdered and choked to death with this belt because she found his stash of money. And one of the great things about Breaking Bad storytelling is that there's always elements like that doesn't seem like they're going to go anywhere, or doesn't seem like they're going to add in or tie in somewhere. And it was all not only a setup of how ridiculous and how demeaning this relationship between Todd and Jesse is, and how Todd views him as this animal, but also it's all to set up this subplot about Jesse trying to find this plethora of money that Todd has hidden in his apartment. So Jesse goes, and you get probably the most Breaking Bad feeling sequence in this movie, where Jesse goes into Todd's apartment in present time, and it's been tossed over by God knows how many people, the cops, maybe people that Todd knew, trying to find this money. And Jesse goes through and tries to find the money himself, looking over every single meticulous detail of this house. The way that Vince Gilligan frames a lot of sequences in this, like whenever there's a sequence in the trailer where he's looking at a wall and the camera kind of tilts, that's really cool. There's a sequence that's kind of like a rat in a maze where it's an overhead shot and it shows Jesse kind of fumbling around in a room, and then it shows him in this and this, and it's a really neat stylistic element that feels so Breaking Bad. So this whole sequence of him trying to find the money, I could see a Breaking Bad episode like that, where Jesse and Walt, or just Jesse, is trying to find money, and it's like a bottle episode, kind of like Fly was, or 4 Days Out, where it's just an entire episode of them trying to find money in this apartment, and it felt that way, which was great. The fact that it just bled right into this movie and felt immediately like it was part of the show. But nonetheless, he finds this money in the fridge, which is another cool little hidden element that feels totally Breaking Bad. Encounters these two, what presumably is cops, that are coming in to look over once more. Jesse ends up getting caught by one of them, holds him up. You still get that moment of humanity from Jesse, where even though he's in desperation, he's not going to kill a cop to get away from it. So he lets himself get taken, finds out very quickly that they're not cops. And that's a very cool element too for audience members, because you're like, fuck, who are these guys then? Are these part of Todd's crew? Are these, the meth dealers of these leftover Gus crew? Who is this? Is this magical electromotive people? And it ends up being two guys who were a part of the welding company that helped build the apparatus to keep Jesse inside of this meth lab, which is another really cool callback. And Jesse has to use those cunning little negotiating skills to get out of this situation while being able to get a part of the money himself. And then all just to get to Robert Forster, which I thought was a great addition to this movie. Robert Forster brought a really cool element to the end of Breaking Bad in the episode Granite State, where he was this disappearer. He was this guy who, again, a character that you don't find out a whole lot about, but you're so interested in the history of this guy. Just like Mike whenever he first showed up on the show. I could watch an entire, probably, mini-series about Robert Forster's character and how he came to be this illegal witness protection program And the fact that he went back to him not only makes sense because that's the logical path that the character Jesse would take, but it's a nice callback to the show, and the fact that we get to see Robert Forster again, unfortunately for the last time, because he actually passed away the day that this movie premiered. I literally watched El Camino, pulled up my phone to see what people were talking about it because I've been avoiding social media all day, and the first thing that I saw was a bunch of posts about Robert Forster passing, so rest in peace, Robert. But the fact that we get to see him one last time in this role of this vacuum salesman who runs this witness protection program for criminals was really cool. And it was curious to me how it was going to play out, because if you watch the show, you know that Saul has set up very clearly that this guy is extremely careful. You get one shot with him and that's it. And Jesse already blew that shot, I think episode 11 of season 5, whenever he figured out that Walt had screwed him over on the rice and cigarette and then walked away from the van. But he finds the van, he finds this vacuum sales place, and he walks in with this pile of money and basically confronts Robert Forster saying, I know you're the guy, you're the dude. And he tries to say the little line that Saul has in the back of the card about, you know, I need an air filter for a Dyson such and such. And he can't remember it. He's like, well, I don't know what the fuck the password is, but you know what I'm here for. Their scene and their exchange is one of the highlights of this movie, because not only is it cool seeing Robert Forster kind of keep his composure and keep his professionalism, and you know, kind of like how Gus did in season 2 whenever he still had that mask on and he was holding to it very strongly, and then as soon as he finally got to that point where he's like, all right, fuck it, he's like, look, you owe me for the last time that I tried to take you. And then he realizes that he not only needs the exact amount that he was going to pay for this service, but he needs twice that to cover episode 10 or 11 whenever he abandoned him the first time. And you get the most comedic scene, in my opinion, of the entire movie, where Robert Forster is telling him, like, all right, fine, if you don't want to pay it, here's all your money, get out, don't come in here again. And Jesse's like, I'm not leaving. And he threatens to call the cops, gets on the phone, does this whole charade. Jesse gets ready to leave and comes back and tries to call his bluff, and is looking him dead in the eye, talking shit to him the whole time, and you just see the cop cruiser come in the background. Pure brilliance. That is the dark comedy and the little situational comedy that Breaking Bad always inserted right into the right spots. So that was awesome. But nonetheless, it sets him on the course for what is going to be the rest of this movie, trying to get $1,800 to get the full amount that Robert Forster needs so that he can disappear him. And it takes him on a path where he has to interact with his parents one last time, which was another really nice element that I wasn't expecting. Because his parents were complicated characters in the show, because you understood where they stood. You understood the fact that they were just very good, you know, high-class, rule-following people that did not view Jesse as a very good part of their lives, because of the fact that he was, you know, a meth addict and he was a drug dealer and all this other stuff. Things that as a parent you can understand. Like, a parent never fully disowns their child, I don't think, but I've known enough people that have had children that have done things like that, to where there's this complication in that relationship, to where they love their kids so much, but they're just so destructive that there has to be this disconnect there. And that's the kind of exploration that you got of Jesse and his parents in season 2, and then eventually season 3 whenever he fucks them over and gets his house back, which is one of my favorite parts of that season. But he calls them, and he saw them on the news earlier talking about the fact that, you know, they were looking into the camera and pleading with Jesse to turn yourself in. And he calls him and says, I want to turn myself in. Can you meet me at this lake that we've spent all this time at back when I was a kid? And they're like, yes, we'll come and get you. Which was a really good element to me to leave the parents with, because as much as it felt like they were just severing ties completely with him at the end of season 2, and then certainly after he fucked him over in season 3 and never heard from them again, it was a nice note to end that relationship on, that they still loved him so much that they were going to go out there knowing that he is wanted for all this crazy shit. They were still going to set themselves out there and try to do what they could to help their son. So that was a good note to end them on again, which is kind of a recurring theme in El Camino. Just nice little notes to wrap up this side of the story with, because there was so many down notes in the finale of Breaking Bad that it kind of is necessary to have a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, especially with the character of Jesse, who everybody wanted to escape this. So I appreciated those elements to this El Camino movie. But he uses them to get out of the house just so he can go in and get his father's guns, which is like these old school like Ruger pistols or something like that. So again, somebody's going to correct me on the model of gun down below. But there's these old school pistols that he goes to meet these guys that he encountered at the Money, these welding guys who were friends with Todd and his uncle and added certainly to Jesse's misery. And I like the fact that he doesn't like walk in guns blazing, or he doesn't set this whole plot to fuck them over or to try to kill people. He does just walk right into the room and say it as plainly as he can, like, look, I just need $1,800 and I'm gonna be gone forever. Can you please help me? Like, and he says it in a tone where he doesn't point it out, but he looks the dude in the eye, almost like, you know how much you have added to the misery of my life. You owe this to me. If you wanna have any decency left over, if you wanna have any kind of redemption whatsoever, just give me this little portion of your money and I'll be gone forever. But this fuckwad won't take it, and he ends up in this little Western standoff with Jesse, which was probably the most badass part of this whole movie, where you don't really know how it's going to go down. You don't know. You know Jesse's got some kind of a trick up his sleeve because of his smile and how confident he is, but they have this little Western standoff, and the guy's like, all right, I'll reach for mine, you reach for yours. And as soon as he reaches, Jesse's got the other gun hidden in his jacket and just fucking blows the dude away into the door. That was awesome.
You ready? Yeah.
Gets his money, goes back to Robert Forster, and basically story-wise, that's the end of the movie. He gets the money to Robert Forster takes him to Alaska, and he has one last little flashback with Jane after he goes over all the details of his new identity with Forster and aces that test. He has this little flashback with Jane where, and she was an element that I was expecting to come back in some degree because she's always been a huge piece of his mental state throughout the rest of the show from the end of season 2 onward. He calls back to a drive that they took where they're talking about fate and how the universe kind of puts you where it wants you. And it ends on a note where she basically tells him, no, don't do that. Don't let the universe put you where it wants you. You take your own path and you take charge of your own life, which is basically the theme of this movie, is Jesse finally taking a hold of everything. Now he's out of the clutches of the neo-Nazis. He's out of the warpath of and like mental control of Walter White, and now he's taking hold of his life and going towards redemption. So thematically, I loved that. I loved how they ended it, and I loved the fact that they wrapped it up on that note of him finding redemption finally. And just like Walter White, righting all of the wrongs that he possibly could on his way out. So I loved the way that the story wrapped up. I mean, there was elements of it that were certainly very small scale that I think disappointed a lot of people. A lot of the comments that I've gotten so far was that it just felt like it was unnecessary, which I did say in my spoiler-free review that I was perfectly satisfied with the end that we got of Jesse, so I could have went on just fine without El Camino, but now that it is here, I do appreciate that it exists. So I understand that to a degree, but a lot of people were angry at this, that it wasn't bigger, or it wasn't a little bit more epic, or didn't have twists and turns. And something that I said in my spoiler-free review that I hold very strong on here is that it shouldn't. Because this is an epilogue. This is the story after the story, and there shouldn't be anything in an epilogue that should overshadow or change or try to up the ante on the climax of the story that was the final 3 episodes of Breaking Bad. So I actually really like the fact that Vince Gilligan kept it small scale, and he kept it kind of grounded. He kept it about Jesse. There wasn't some big plot twist about Walter White being alive, or fucking Walter White was his father the whole time, or some crazy shit. There was none of that. It was just about Jesse thematically trying to get whatever redemption that he could in Albuquerque and then go towards his salvation. And that was enough for me. That's exactly what this should have been. So that is my stance on that criticism. But loved all of that. I loved all the callbacks, all of the returning characters, and the big one that I did not mention, because I wanted to talk about it kind of a little bit more at length, which I knew they were going to put in here if they were smart. It was going to be a nice little surprise when it happened. There's a scene right before the end of the film where you see Jesse Pinkman back in his, his beanie and his little, sweatsuit and everything like that, to where it puts him back into like that season 2 garb. And he walks through this hotel and he knocks on the door and keeps walking, and then you just see Walter White come out into the hallway right next to him, and they're just walking, and I was just like, yes, it's fucking Walt, bitch. And I think most fans said that. Yes, just like with Jesse Plemons, the bald cap on Bryan Cranston doesn't look 100% perfect, but my God, people, he's not gonna shave his head for a movie that he probably got a couple $100,000 to show up in at best. So realistically, I understand this. He looks good enough. He looks exactly like Walter White, and that's all I can ask for. So that's another negative that I saw a couple times where I was just like, oh man, you really wanted to hate this, didn't you? But he shows up in the hallway, and they go into this this buffet area, and you get the one. It might be the only time in the entire movie, which somebody said it should have been more, and I kind of agree with that. But the one time I think in the entire movie where Jesse's filling up his plate with all this stuff, and he goes, "Yeah, bitch," and walks away. But they sit down and they have this really great conversation, which again calls right back to Breaking Bad and the style of writing that Vince Gilligan likes to use that I love, to where they have this conversation that could be throwaway. It could have absolutely nothing to do with anything. You could take this out, everything's gonna move just fine. But there's enough to grab onto in this conversation that really just adds into all of the themes of the show and the themes of what they're going for in El Camino and the relationship of those two characters that it's brilliant. They sit down, Walter White's still kind of sick. This is right after 4 days out, which is another element I love, that they were putting callbacks in that fans of the show could figure out where they fit in the timeline of Breaking Bad. They sit down, you realize that it's right after 4 days out, after they got the RV running again with Walt's little battery. They're sitting down, he's still a little bit sick, he's not really eating. Jesse's picking out, he's got a whole bunch of pineapple. They start talking about pineapple, how Jesse loves it, Walt doesn't really care for it. He starts talking about, you know, it's got a lot of bromine or bromide in it, and Walt corrects him on the element that is in it, which is a clever callback because that is the BR of Breaking Bad. But nonetheless, they had this conversation about the pineapple, and it eventually leads to a conversation where Walt is basically doing that father-son thing again, the moments that he really does genuinely care about Jesse, where he's telling him, you know, why don't you go off and go back to college? Why don't you do something? You know, you can get your GED, and then Jesse's like, hang on, bitch, I got my fucking high school diploma. You were one of the people that handed it to me. And that was another great little thing that their relationship has always had, that little bit of tension there. So that was fun. But it all leads to this line that Walt gives where he's like, you know, you're really lucky. And he looks out the window and he's like, you didn't have to wait your whole life to do something special. Which shows, again, the element of Walter White where he just feels like his whole life is wasted to a certain extent, like he could have done so much more. And then him saying that to Jesse where he's in his 20s and he's in the same situation that Walt is in his 50s at the end of his life. So I love that element that they left it on too. So I really thought that a lot of the callbacks in this, people have argued in my comments that a lot of the callbacks felt like it was just kind of padding it out and it wasn't really necessary, and I totally disagree, because I feel like a lot of the callbacks is what places this right in the heart of Breaking Bad, and it adds to the show. It gives elements a little bit more, it gives a little bit more to Jesse's character and just fills in a couple of pieces that we didn't realize were missing from certain timeline pieces of the show, like season 2 at 4 days out and season 5 whenever he's in the cage and things like that, and even the conversation that he had with Jane. These things that are ticking still in Jesse's head that we never realized were there. So I thought all of the callbacks were really great. Yes, do the aesthetic of some of the characters not 100% line up? Probably, but it didn't really take me out of the movie at all. So overall, guys, again, I really loved El Camino. Wasn't 5 out of 5. Like, I gave all the seasons of Breaking Bad 5 out of 5. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 just because I could be just fine without El Camino. Like I said, there's a certain element of it that does feel unnecessary, but it's an unnecessary that I didn't really know that I needed. So it's here. I love the fact that it's here, and I would not want to go back to the version of reality that did not have El Camino, but there is a certain aspect that I will acknowledge is a little bit unnecessary, and Breaking Bad is perfection just in itself without El Camino. And the fact that nobody that doesn't watch Breaking Bad will understand anything that goes on in this movie, so that's not this movie's fault. It was made for fans. If you're not a fan of Breaking Bad, you need to watch Breaking Bad. That's all I can say. But I loved El Camino, and that was mostly all the things that I wanted to go into that I didn't want to spoil in my first review. So what do you guys think about El Camino? Did you have fun with it? Do you feel like it was unnecessary and you're not really gonna watch it ever again? Did you love all the things that it added to it? How do you feel about the callbacks? Did the heavy Todd, people are calling hashtag fat Todd, did hashtag fat Todd bother you and hashtag Walter White bald cat bother you, or did it just kind of, you noticed it and then you went right back into being sucked into this movie? Let me know down below. And rest in peace, Robert Forster. Thank you for this awesome role in your entire career. So, what do you guys think about El Camino? Let me know down in the comment section below. Please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber. If you guys want to check out some social media links, you can check the video description below for Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, my Patreon page, which is a great way to give back to this channel and help this channel grow while getting cool exclusive content for your eyes only. And just below that is my Teespring store, which has all of my merchandise designs. You have t-shirts, you have bags, you have sweatshirts. Check that out down below, guys. I've got 31 on 31 designs. Get them in now. And for this weekend only, if you use the promo code SPOOKY, you get 10% off of everything. So if you're watching this in the future, it's only for today. Check that out, please. Get your 31 on 31 designs ready for this Halloween for that to drop. I also have my Autop Stream logo down there, so check that out and represent Autop Stream, guys. And if you want to check out some more of my videos, including all of my Breaking Bad reviews, you can check those out by clicking right over here.